Hi, everyone. My name is Carla Gericke, and I'm the president of the Free State Project. And before we get started with this speech, and please feel free to come down, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this event. As someone who's organized several events for the Liberty community, I know how much work goes into something like this. And so for those of you who are here, let's give a warm round of applause for everyone who has worked on putting together this event. So this talk is entitled Living Liberty, and for those of you who are not familiar with what the Free State Project is, the Free State Project is a radical social experiment, except we are actually at the stage where it's moving from experiment and from the petri dish into really something that is tangible and real and that is happening real time. One of the things I love about coming to conferences like this is trying to find the balance between ideas and academia and the intellectual and the practical, because we have so many smart people who come here and talk about, everything from Mises to Hayek to Socrates, all over the show. And ultimately, at some stage, you really have to ask yourself, what is the best way that I can implement these ideas that gives it the best chance of success? And today we'll be talking a little bit about that, because that really is what the Free State Project is. So we are a cultural movement where we're trying to attract 20,000 libertarians, liberty lovers, ANCAPs, whatever you want to label yourself. If you're really into liberty, you should check out the Free State Project. So it started about 10 years ago, I guess 11 years ago by now, and it was the brainchild of a then graduate student, Jason Sarens. And when he said, he wrote this paper because he was very disillusioned with the entire process of how any liberty-oriented movement could happen. He was back in the Libertarian Party, this was back in the late 90s, and he just realized, this is not something that's going to give us a solution for the problems we're facing. So he wrote a paper, he was a Yale student at the time, and it was right at the time when the internet was sort of taking off, and as we know, lots of libertarians are really into the internet, and people just responded. They said, wow, this is an incredibly great idea. If we could put 20,000 like-minded activists together in one place, maybe we can actually create something that would be the beacon of liberty for the rest of the world to emulate. So they voted on New Hampshire about 10 years ago. It was chosen for various reasons. It's a very low tax state. There's no personal income tax, which I personally believe is a form of slavery. The question always becomes, what level? Oh, if we take 10% of your income, that's okay. If we take 20%, is it 30%? Is it once they start taking 50% of your labor? Is that where it sort of is the tipping point where we have to fight back? I believe it's 0%. And so one of the things that really appealed to me about New Hampshire is there is 0% personal state income tax. So it's been a decade. And in the past, my PR lady would say to me, I would sort of downplay the fact that the Free State Project's been around for 10, 11 years, because I felt like it should have happened sooner, right? We should have had a faster early adoption for this idea. But then I realized that, first of all, the ideas of liberty within the greater world are still so young and new and sort of little yolky egg-like, right? Everyone who is in this room who is thinking about these things and contemplating how we can create a more voluntary society is a pioneer. Everyone in this room is thinking about something that most people in the world are not even contemplating yet. So I was like, okay, I don't know, 10 years, maybe I should downplay that. And she said, the PR lady said, no, embrace that. Really say, it's been around for a while, and it's something that we are seeing over time is a successful strategy. So we have about 16,200 people have signed up. No one has to move to New Hampshire until we reach the 20,000 mark. We're not quite sure when that's going to happen, but it will be fairly soon. And in typical libertarian fashion, a bunch of us decided we weren't going to wait. We weren't going to wait for that moment. We decided that the value proposition of the state of New Hampshire, which ranks lowest unemployment, safest place in America, has low taxes, open carry, concealed carry, $10 thing. People, I go to the Rite Aid around the corner from where I live, and people open carry in the store, and it's no issue. It's just, it's normal, right? So you get to really claim and reclaim and assert things like your Second Amendment rights. So in that libertarian fashion of, don't tell me what to do, a bunch of us were like, we're not going to wait till we hit the 20,000 mark. We're just going to start moving. And so in 2008, there was a first 1,000 movement, and the idea was, hey, if we can get 1,000 people to be early movers, maybe we can make this happen. So everything in life is a numbers game. Not 1,000 people moved, but 400 people moved. And when you ask someone to move somewhere, it's not easy. It's not like saying, go be a troll on Facebook, or be an armchair warrior and sit around and espouse opinions. Those things are important. We need to do that because we need to spread the ideas of liberty. But to actually go and say, I'm going to get my affairs in order and I'm going to up and move to this new place is a hard thing to ask people. And New Hampshire is not, it's a beautiful state. The 4 seasons are awesome, but the winters are long. And people will say to me, but, oh, come on, it's so cold there. And I say 2 things to that. One is statists love warm weather. And we see that everywhere, including in places like California. And you know what? Liberty warms the cockles of your heart. So if you decide to do this, you will get it back in spades. It will be like a sauna for life. So about 10% of us have already moved prior to the move itself. So in some ways, everything I'm explaining to you now is a precursor of the things that will come. Because right now, the project hasn't really even started. But with the 10% of people who have moved, so we have about 1,600 movers, here are some of the successes and here are some of the things we've been able to do. We're not doing an experiment anymore. This is actually a pilot program. It's a program, if we can do it successfully, everyone in the world will be able to say these ideas work, look at the prosperity, look at the success, and then it's something that from there we can take across the board, across America, and then ultimately across the world. But we have to start somewhere. And this is a proven strategy that we know is working. We need more people. We need to get the last 4,000 signers. If you have an inkling of a sense somewhere down the line that, wow, if this really does turn into the Yankee Hong Kong, which I'll talk about in a little bit, then yeah, that's where I want to be, right? Because it makes sense that anyone who is passionate about liberty will want to be in the place that is most passionate about liberty. So as we build it, more and more movers will come and people will say, well, these strategies work. Economic freedom works. Free markets works. Disruptive technologies work. And I want to go where I can be in on the ground floor. And that's really what the Free State Project offers. We're looking for people who are awesome. We are looking for people who can, save up some money and come out. Any race, any creed, anything. The only people we don't want is if you're like crazy ass, violent, and this is not like a gun thing. I've done Appleseed, I can sniper shoot. I think the Second Amendment is extremely important, but we're not going to New Hampshire to get into the Second Civil War. The idea is to really just create something that is an example for people to understand that these ideas work. Our statement of intent, which is the thing that you would sign, basically just says that you have an inkling that you'll move to the state of New Hampshire where you'll exert the fullest practical effort in the creation of a society. And I think those words are important because we're going to talk about the societal things in a second, but the creation of a society in which the maximum role of government is the protection of an individual's rights to life, liberty, and property. So in some ways, that statement sort of harkens back to the Bill of Rights. Now, this is a more voluntarist conference. I personally am a fairly principled anarchist who happens to vote, which I will explain in a second, because I think there is power to the vote on a localized level. I think it's dead in the water in terms of the federal government, but I really do think on a local level there are things we can do. So I'm sure many people here have heard the joke. In fact, I'm almost confident that I coined it, but I'm not going to lay claim to that, but we can go find the videos. That what is the difference between a minarchist, which is basically someone who believes in small, controlled government, which I don't think you really can have, but let's say you can. Minarchism is better than what we have now. So from an incrementalist standpoint, I'll take minarchism over big statism, right? I'll take anarchism over minarchism. But what's the difference between a minarchist and an anarchist? And the standing joke was, it's 6 months in New Hampshire. What I've come to realize over time is it's also what's the difference between an anarchist who doesn't vote and an anarchist who does vote? It's another 2 years in New Hampshire. And basically what happens is we're building this incredibly compelling community of people who think about things. Our Liberty calendar, there's stuff going on every single day. We have meetups. We have thousands of people who've moved. And so we've really gotten to the stage where there's opportunity to not only say, I have to hang out with any liberty person, you can actually have nuanced relationships where you're like, I can hang out with the liberty people I like. I don't have to be friends with everyone. And that's extremely liberating. So the reason why it's 2 years between when you move from minarchism to anarchism back to voting is because there's a 2-year residency requirement in the state of New Hampshire. You have to be there 2 years in order to vote for someone. So when the Free State Project started and people started moving, there's never been, the Free State Project itself is really just the vehicle to bring people to the state of New Hampshire. Once participants are in the state, they work with different groups from the NHLA through to 420 rallies, through to decentralized groups, through to building meshes, living off the grid. Whatever your jam is, there's something there for you. But the 2-year requirement to run for office is, you come in, and most people will come in and they're like, I'm not gonna run for office. I was like, I'm not gonna run for office. But we've seen successes. We've actually seen that if people do run for office in the state And New Hampshire is very unique in the world. It has a state house that has 400 members. So New Hampshire's population is only 1.2 million. So 400 members means most of those guys represent about 3,000, 3,200 to 700 people. So they are actually your friends and neighbors. Like if you're going to a local grocery store, you see your reps. They have direct lines that you can call at any time to talk to them. They don't have offices. They get a locker in the State House, and that's like where they get to keep their stuff. And so it's very unique. In fact, it's the third largest legislative body in the English-speaking world. So there's a real opportunity for influence and change. So the first time a Free State Project participant ran for office was in, I believe, 2008. And we had one member of the Free State Project elected. So that's an individual who said, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to go here, and I think I can affect change. From there, we had 10 elected the next election cycle, 12 the next election cycle, and in this last election, a couple of weeks ago, we had dozens of Free Staters elected. So these are people who are principled, who actually understand the issues, and they are, now state reps. I think this is phenomenal. On top of that, there was a caucus, not a caucus, there's an organization called the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, which was started both by local New Hampshireites, and the locals really do love us. There really is a live and let live flavor in the state. There really is this sense of live free or die. And it's not just lip service. I thought originally when I moved there that, our people really like this, but they really, really are. If you talk to your neighbor or the guy, who does your car inspection, or where you change your oil, or where you buy your bread, they're all like, yeah, the government, they're all a bunch of crooks. Like they just are old school. They just really think that way. And so the NHLA, which was started both by Free Staters but also local people, endorsed a number of candidates for this election cycle, and 25% of the State House, so 120 people out of 400, i.e. an actual caucus, are now elected, principled liberty candidates. So, why does that matter? And I'll get to the Reb stuff in the end, but it does matter because, we're not actually sure what approach is going to work. And I eschew the ideas of there's a best way to do things. I just believe in the marketplace of ideas. We believe in free markets, and we should apply those rules equally to the free market of ideas. So we should say these ideas compete with each other, and which one is going to be the most successful. I like to think the Free State Project is a baanbreker, that's not English, is a forerunner of these ideas, because I do believe we are doing something unique within the marketplace of ideas. But also, we are bringing together thousands of people. So, imagine this conference plus 10, plus 100. And you have all these smart people coming together. Everyone thinks they're the bee's knees. And we have to actually figure out from the ground up, how would this voluntary society really work? Do we like politics? Do we, not like them? Do we vote? Do we not vote? And it's really exciting to be in a world where you can parse these ideas out. So the political front is really just one, I think, of sort of three categories. So there's sort of political, legislative stuff in the system. Then there's out of the system stuff, which can include things like civil disobedience. And then there's really the free market, agora, business, entrepreneur, blockchain kind of part of it, right? So further in the system part of it, we have seen just with small amounts of people who are principled, who are running for office, In 2010 in New Hampshire, they cut the budget by $1 billion. It was a 10% line item budget cut that was not bullshit, because we all know they'll move numbers around and say, oh, if we tip this revenue and we take it here, we can say whatever. It was a clean budget cut of 10% that actually balanced the budget in the state. They have passed things like jury nullification. New Hampshire is the only state in the union, and we should really get away from even talking about America in that way, I believe. Like, what is the union? You know, it's it's a sort of status construct. New Hampshire is the only place where there's an enshrined jury nullification law that basically says if you're the defendant, either if you're pro se and you're representing yourself, or if you have an attorney, they are allowed to directly address the jury and say to the jury, hey, you know what? If you think this guy did it, but you also think that law is stupid, you don't have to put him in jail. And, you know, that's how we rolled back prohibition. So it's definitely a way that, you know, it's a big little power tool that we have. Medicinal marijuana has been passed. New Hampshire is not done as well as the other surrounding New England states in terms of good weed laws, but it's actually indicative of our successes, because basically what's happened is New Hampshire was the only state that on the legislative side actually passed. So instead of it being a referendum or a voter bottom-up thing, it was the House passed a full decrim bill, and the Senate was like, whoa, we can't do that. And then the governor was like, oh, we definitely can't do that. But it actually came out of the people who are in the State House, and I think that's pretty exciting. Nano brews are huge now in New Hampshire because they passed a bill. I think it's a $75 license. And the story behind it was a Free Stater who moved out early, maybe 2008. He started a really cool brewery. They had all these really cool bottles of beer. I don't know, one had kind of a booby shot on it, and so they told them they couldn't do the label for it. And ultimately, the state shut down his brewery. And instead of saying, oh, you know what, I got effed by the state, he said, you know what, I'm gonna do something about this. And so he started a lobbyist firm, he wrote a bill, he pushed it through, and they passed a bill that says you can sell up to, I believe it's 2,000 gallons of beer. And so we have this real like little pop-up beer culture where people are just starting small breweries, and when you travel across the state to restaurants and hotels, you know, it's like a 30-place tap, and they're like, you know, we have this beer, we have the Pine Tree Rebellion beer, we have, you know, and it's and that's part of what we like, right? More choice, more decentralization. Also on the legislative side, we have seen pushback, of course, as one could expect. So a couple of years ago, there was a Democrat in the area of Keene, where a lot of our sort of civil disobedience happens, and she came out and she made a Facebook post, and I think after that she kind of learned how Facebook worked, because she's like, oh, this is never gonna go away. And she said, you know, we don't like these free staters, and I think we should start to pass bills to restrict the freedoms they think they're going to find here. That was gold for us. I mean, we got maybe the most signers we've ever gotten. It was picked up by Rush Limbaugh. It was all over, you know, the right-wing talk show media. And it was basically just this woman really playing her cards, right? A statist just really saying what she believed. And she was like, oh my God, you guys actually threaten our statism. And I like to think we do, because that's why we're there. Also on the sort of legislative side, but more within maybe the justice system or the injustice system, we've seen some successes. We had school choice came up, and the Institute of Justice actually came out, and we had some Free Stater reps push through a bill to say, okay, we can't shut down the Department of Education, but instead of just trying to destroy or kill the bad ideas, instead of trying to suppress those, let's start to go around, which is what something like Bitcoin offers us, right? Once we're disruptive and we can go around things, that's when we're winning. So there was a bill that was passed that basically gave school choice to people so they could get vouchers and they could go to private schools instead of public schools. And of course the state was like, oh no, we're gonna shut this down. And IJ was like, hey, we'll come fight the good fight. And we won that fight. Another case was my personal case, and for those of you who don't know, but I was arrested in 2010. I was filming police officers at night, and they didn't like that, so they arrested me. I'm a recovering lawyer. I'd never been arrested before. It was a very eye-opening experience because, we talk a lot about, oh, we have these rights. Oh, we can push back in these ways. But honestly, once someone has you physically chained to a pole because they were like, get back in your car, and you're like, okay, I guess I'll get back in my car, and then another cop shows up and he's like, show me license and registration, and I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. The only reason I'm in my car is because I followed that instruction. So, and the way I like to explain it is, let's say you were at Walmart, right? And a cop walks up to you and they're like, show me your license and registration. And you're like, am I being detained? That's the right response, always. Everyone knows that, right? So, show me your license and registration. Am I being detained? I order you back in your car. Okay, cop seems crazy. I guess I'll get back in my car, right? And then they're like, now you're legally obliged to give me your license and registration. I mean, that's the argument they were making. And I'm like, that's not how the world works. So I'm in my car, and they are license and registration, and I'm like, meh, I don't think so. So I roll up my window and lock my doors. I don't necessarily recommend that. So they're like, you have 10 seconds or we're gonna break your car window and, physically extract you. And, it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm kind of scared. I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll get out the car. So they arrest me, take me down. Turns out, good cop, bad cop, not always the case. Sometimes it's just bad cop and worse cop. So, it's 3 hours. I don't really want to process. I'm answering some of the questions. I'm not answering all of them. Social security number, no, I'm not obliged. Like the little back and forth. So they confiscate my camera. And we'll do questions at the end. Well, at that stage, they were just like disobeying an officer, right? So they started with disobeying an officer, then they added government obstruction, and then, and thank you very much, Weir PD, they added wiretapping. So what happened was, so it was 3 hours later, it's 3 in the morning, and the bail commissioners come, and I'm free to go. And they give me my handbag back, but they don't give me my video camera. And I'm like, I need my camera back. And they're like, no, we're keeping it for evidence. And I'm like, okay, that's not really cool with me, but if you're gonna do that, I need a receipt. I need to know you took my camera, so I have paperwork so I can prove you took my camera. And they're like, no. And I'm like, I'm not leaving unless you give me a receipt or you give me my camera. So the officer in charge is like, fine, I'll charge you with wiretapping. So he charges me with wiretapping as well, and because the charge is on the paper, now I can prove they've taken my camera, so I decide to get out of there. I don't get out of there on my own volition. I get out of there because I'm escorted out by 3 burly officers who take me out behind the police station at 3 in the morning in March in New Hampshire, so it's cold, it's dark, it's kind of scary, the game's over, we've done the back and forth, and at this stage, I'm just like, I really just want to be gone. They close in on a nice little scrum, and the cop says, "You better get out of here before someone gets hurt." And I'm like, yeah, I probably should get out of here before someone gets hurt, so I'm just gonna tootle around the corner. Now, what's happening in the front of house is by this stage, there are 10 activists who've shown up because someone put out a Port 411, which is part of the community. We have all these tools in place. Some of it is purely happenstance because it was literally someone who knew the car, we were in 2 cars, and recognized the cars, put out the Port 411, other people showed up, a friend who was with me also got arrested because he was filming inside the front of the police station, and they said, "Turn your cameras off," and he's like, "I have the right to film here." And they were like, "Turn your cameras off, we're gonna arrest you." And he was walking out of the station and he said, "You pussies." And they were like, down on the floor with their tasers out, like spread out in the parking lot, just the whole, when you poke them a little too much, the animal brain kicks in and they just can't help themselves. So that court case, I was just like, look, I'm in the right, you guys are in the wrong. And I knew that, but my camera actually didn't work that night. So I didn't have the footage in order to really prove what happened. But I knew halfway through, I was like, my card's full, it's not really recording, but I'm gonna continue to pretend to record because I believe in police accountability. And I think if you're recording, they might be on a little better behavior. And we are seeing that historically now. So, they dropped the charges against me, and I was like, fine, I'm suing you for 37 counts of violations of my federal rights. Let's go. And I didn't even feel bad because I had told them that night. It's like, when we get out of here, I'm gonna sue your asses. And I did. And I won. So I took them all the way to the First Circuit Appeals Court. Narrowed the issues, which I would highly recommend from a tactical standpoint. Don't try and win. I didn't want to be like, you've ruined my life forever. I'm a victim now. I mean, I certainly, when I see cops, I'll lock my car and drive, turn my windows up still. But I was like, I want this narrow point of law. Can we film police officers to go to a circuit court and have a good decision? So the First Circuit applies to, Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island, Puerto Rico, New Hampshire. I don't remember if Vermont's in there, but it's a fairly big area. And the case revolved around 2 things. One was, is it legal to film police officers? And many of you here will be familiar with the Glick decision. And in that, which also came out of the First Circuit, they said, well, yeah, if it's on the Boston Commons, which is a First Amendment protected sort of space, and you're a third party and you were far away, we're gonna say that's okay. So in my case, it was like, well, it was at a traffic stop, which the courts have found are inherently dangerous, right, to police officers. I like to say they're inherently dangerous to us because those blinding blue lights are certainly not there to protect us. If you're driving down a road and even if you're a statist, to me this is one of the most obvious metaphors or something that we should really communicate to people. If you're driving down the road and a cop has these lights on, there is nothing safe about that situation. It's blinding lights, it's dangerous, and it's dangerous by their actions, not our actions. Yeah. All right. And, oh, see, now the yeah just totally threw me. So I won the case, but what it turned on was, okay, is it okay to do it at night at a traffic stop? And of course, their catch-all, only the state could do this kind of situation. Does everyone here know what qualified immunity is? So this is one of those like great statist crap tools. So what they do is they're like, to us, they argue, Ignorance of the law is no excuse, right? We hear this all the time. But all of us are like 3-time felons every day because the body of law now is so comprehensive and ridiculous that no one here could know what the laws are. But the state being the state, they're like, not only could you not know what the laws are, but if you're ignorant of them, you should have known. But then what the state argues on the other side is if you're a state agent, then ignorance of the law is an absolute defense. So these are the people, this is what qualified immunity says, is for you, mere mundane, ignorance of the law is no excuse. For us, the enforcers of the law, it is an absolute defense. That is the ridiculousness of the world we live in. There is no rule of law in this country anymore. And I saw it from my police reports that lied on the face of it, where I was literally like, wow. I laughed and then I cried when I read them because I was like, they have made so much stuff up here that if this actually goes to trial, I could go to prison for 8 years. Amongst the things that the police officer said is that I pulled up after they pulled someone else over. I got out of my car, ran down a highway screaming, "Remember the cause!" Now, that's not really my shtick. That's not really like how I like to roll. For me, it's not about the cause. It's about individualism and what we can do together. The other thing they said was that I had a camera, and the police officer actually came in and said this to me while I was chained to the pole, which, by the way, chained to the pole, tight handcuffs, been there 2 hours. I was like, hey guys, can you just like come loosen this a little bit because it's getting a little tight? Bad cop and worse cop, right? Came over, made the handcuffs tighter so that my hands started turning blue. So, you see stuff in the movies and then you live through it and you're just like, wow, like you wouldn't really imagine it would be that way. So, long story short, sorry, I got a little derailed there, but very passionate, is on the legislative front, we can do wins. And also on sort of court cases and just people saying enough is enough. And what's cool about New Hampshire is you can say enough is enough, and you can actually have people who back you up. There were people who showed up the same night I was arrested. There are people who help you take notes. You have lawyers. You have all of those things. Another example of court case sort of wins is, have you guys heard of the Robin Hooders of Keene? Probably, yeah. So these are predominantly Free Staters who have moved out, who are more interested in the civil disobedience side of things. So what they've been doing is they go and they pay parking meters before the parking attendant. So there's basically someone who's about to write tickets and there's someone feeding the meters as they go along. So 2 things. One is that irks them because it irks their authority, right? It also irks them because it hurts their bottom dollar. Like they're losing money. And I've seen numbers thrown around, I haven't verified these myself, but up to like $80,000 in lost parking revenue. So now there's a fiscal economic interest in them kind of clamping down. So in all their wisdom, the city of Keene decided they were going to sue the Robin Hooders. And they were like, we're going to sue you for harassing our parking attendants. And I was like, well, let me go read up what your job description is if you're a parking attendant. And it's like, oh, part of your job description says people are going to harass you because you know what? No one likes getting a ticket, right? So it's not that it's liberty activists saying, oh, hey, parking attendant, you suck. It's pretty much anyone who ever gets a ticket. So that's one of those bridges you can build with the noobs, what should we call them? The muggles. That's a bridge you can build. So I thought the Robin Hooding was a fantastic idea. It's sort of something that the community at large can get behind, and they did. What, in all of their wisdom, did the city of Keene decide? We're going to sue these 6 Robin Hooders. So they sue them, They lose their case, as they should, and then they're like, oh no, we're going to appeal. So in the past month, there was a New Hampshire Supreme Court case. The decision is still pending, but where the arguments were, hey, Supreme Court of New Hampshire, will you build this buffer zone around parking attendants? That's like a First Amendment free zone. And I'm hoping, and they should, based on precedent and case law that comes prior, they should just shoot that down and say, look, you know, if the city of Keene wants to do something about it, they can pass an ordinance, and then we can look at whether that's constitutional. But it's not up to the Supreme Court to say, hey, we're going to create this buffer zone, right? So the other things that are beautiful that are happening in the system and just really in the state at large is people are noticing we're there. And not only are they noticing we're there, but they also are becoming our allies in ways that are unexpected. Because once in a while, you still run into good journalists, you still run into people who are inquisitive and curious about things, who will ask the right questions. So in the past, last week, we had an article that came out, and it was in the Concord Monitor, which, you know, we like to call the Commie Monitor for the most part. It's issued out of the, you know, the capital city, and it's from the State House, and it's sort of left-leaning. But they wrote this article about two Free Staters. They're a husband and wife team, Carol and Dan McGuire, and they moved out about 6 years ago, I guess, ran for office. He's a third term, she's a second term rep. And in the article that's in like your local little newspaper, they discuss at length the broken window fallacy. So that's a big deal. Like, you're in a small state where you're trying to really express and convince people about the philosophy of liberty, and you're starting to get newspaper articles where people are legitimately talking about economic issues, what is seen, what is unseen, how do these things fit together. It doesn't matter how good the intentions of the government is to say, let's help, you know, the war on poverty, let's help the homeless, let's help whatever. The unseen, of course, is you can't take something through coercion, through force, through taxation, and do anything good with it. It's blood money. And the fact that that is a discussion that happens in a newspaper in New Hampshire, I think is compelling, and it really shows how far we've moved. Another thing that happened, this was in 2012, some of you may have heard about it. So we have Ferguson that was in the news now, but before Ferguson there was Concord, New Hampshire, and the city of Concord wrote a grant application, federal grant application to the federal government to get, it was $276,000 so that they could buy a Bearcat. I don't know if I can still remember but it's a ballistic engineered, armored response counterattack truck. I like to call it a tank, and I like to, when I write the word Bearcat, write it in all caps. Because, you know, we all understand that there's a propaganda war that happens too. So it's really smart, you know, if you have a tank that has a turret that can shoot grenades, and you call it a Bearcat, that sounds warm and fuzzy. Like, they do these things on purpose, right? So in that grant application, they said that the Free State Project was a present and daily danger, and that's why they needed the tank in the state, in the capital city. So I'm sure some people here still remember Jurassic Park, but remember like the little dinosaur that comes out and it's like, that's how I felt, because I was like, do not call me a domestic terrorist. Do not say I'm a daily threat. Do not conflate your evilness and your immorality and your sociopathy with what we are trying to do in that state. You know, we believe in the non-aggression principle. We believe in the philosophy of liberty. We believe in live and let live. And do not, you know, put your bad mentality on our organization.
I think they call that projection.
Yes, exactly. And so, we fought back. We lost that battle. Unfortunately, they did get their tank. But we did unseat a bunch of people who voted for it. So, cum si, cum sa, right? A lesson that was learned there was really going out and thinking about what the media is you're going to generate. So if you're an activist, you really do want to be thinking about, hey, if this is going to be filmed, how is it going to be perceived? How is it going to play, right? So, some of the slogans we came up with was more Mayberry, less Fallujah. I'm sure people have seen that. We all dressed up in suits and pearls and stuff, so Rush Limbaugh and those guys picked it up, and they were like, oh, these are well-heeled conservatives. We're like, we'll take it. And then there are organizations like Cop Block. Everyone here has probably heard of them. They have a table at the back. Cop Block was started by 2 Free State Project participants. It's a largely decentralized organization now. It has over 2 million followers on Facebook. And that's just about police accountability. And as an activist, that's really something you can start to look at. So I just realized I went all kinds of crazy. Are you guys with me? Like 10, 15 more minutes? Yeah? All right. So the other thing I think we're doing that's extremely unique in New Hampshire, and it's not only, poking the bear, making sure everyone's got each other's back, the community aspects, but it's also the third arm, I would say, if we're going to say we have the in the system stuff, and then we have this out of the system sort of civ disruptive stuff. Then over here, we really have free markets, the agora, the blockchain, Bitcoin, all of those things, and they are also disruptive, right? It's sometimes you want to go against the state, but sometimes you just want to go around it. You just want to create solutions that have nothing to do with what they're even worried about, which I think is the opportunity of something like Bitcoin. So what I like to liken it to is that we're building a Yankee Hong Kong. Now, some people don't like the term Yankee, some people don't like the term Hong Kong. You can substitute whatever's going to work for your flavor of what you want. It could be the Yankee Switzerland, I've actually seen written. But the idea is pretty much, okay, what makes this geographic area unique? So some of the interesting things about Hong Kong is it has no central bank. It has 3 banks that issue currencies. They have their own floating rates, interest rates. They compete, and that's the kind of world we want, right? So I would love to see in a place like New Hampshire where we start to create this place where maybe we start, it's the Bitcoin capital of the world, where we just get together and someday, we have a skyrise in downtown Manchester that's basically like Bitcoin Bank #1, and like right next to it it's Bitcoin Bank #2, and whatever it is, but just this idea of opportunity. In Manchester, we don't have a lot of high rises, so anyone who wants to build a skyscraper, if you have that, Randian passion for architecture, let me know. But what we do have is the mill buildings, and I call them sideways skyscrapers because they're the long, flat buildings, but if you tip them up, they're like almost as high as the Empire State Building. So there's a lot of opportunity to come and to start businesses and to do things that are unique and unusual. We have the greatest independent liberty media in America. Everyone here is familiar with Free Talk Live, the LRN.FM network, podcasts that come out of New Hampshire. A lot of the things you're probably listening to are things that are generated out there. One of the things that's most close to my heart is the activist centers that are starting. So within different regions, so the entire state of New Hampshire is fairly small. You can drive point to point in 3.5 hours. Entire population is 1.2 million, and we have in these different regions these agorist activist centers where you see everything from Bitcoin Lamassu machines, which were started by Free Staters as well, so the Harvey Brothers started the first Bitcoin ATM in the world. That's from there. So you get that sense of community where you're working together with people to do innovative stuff. At the activist centers, you might see one person selling apple cider for Bitcoin exchange. Someone else has their ATM and they're taking the interest on top. Someone else is doing breakfast, and we'll come together all the time. I mean, it's almost literally exhausting at this stage because there's just too much going on. We have things like private charities that we've started. Shire Sharing every Thanksgiving has started to feed the homeless. We're in the 5th, I believe, maybe it's the 4th year. The first year we fed 55 families. This year we're up to 500. It's not illegal, and it's one of those things where it was really good to build the bridges by working with other churches and finding out who have other people who are in need. Now the progressives, being the meanies they are, of course, were like, well, you guys suck because you only feed them one day a year. And it's like, how about you pick a day? And how about someone else picks a day? And within a community, if we all pick a day, I'm pretty sure there are 365 organizations that could really make a difference. And right like that, we could get rid of a good chunk of welfare, right? So, almost in conclusion, sorry. We have 2 events. We do Liberty Forum, which is coming up March 5th through the 8th, and that'll be in Manchester, New Hampshire for the first time. And then, of course, the so famous by this stage Porcupine Freedom Festival, also known as PorcFest, and that'll be June 22nd through the 29th. Liberty Forum this year, the theme is going to be Moved by Liberty. And the thinking is both moved by liberty, meaning please move, please sign up. I have my paperwork at the back there. Think about it. One of the things with the number is just, if you have an inkling you might do this, just sign up, because the number is something we just need to make go away, is the way I look at it, because for me, it's all about who moves and what are we doing. It's not about statistics, it's not about forms, it's not about those metrics. It's actually about activity and results. So if we are actively making our lives freer, that's what it's about. So grab a sheet, sign up, find me. So Liberty Forum is going to have Jeffrey Tucker, one of our favorite speakers always, will be out there. We have Patrick Byrne, who's a big Bitcoin guy. He'll be coming out. Sheriff Mack, who apparently, did a smackdown yesterday. I only saw this on my phone this morning, but he said it was a very short clip, and he's one of our keynote speakers, so I was a little surprised by this, Sheriff Mack. He's not here, that's for the camera. He said, the Free State Project is not going to succeed, and what's going to succeed is this county-wide takeover, through sheriffs and arrests, citizens arrests, and it surprised me, because I think there is philosophically something we really need to start to think about. If we don't believe in force, the only tools we have are persuasion. Right? If you're not going to put a gun to someone's head and make them do something you want them to do, you have to be able to convince them to do something. And the important part of that equation is not to shit on other people's ideas. The most effective way is to say, Sheriff Mack could have said, I'm not sure what's going to happen with the project, but I'm going to try this. So I'm competing with you, but not dumping on you. So the idea is to say, he could say, I think this is a better approach, I think this is more effective, and I think, I will, whatever his county is, will be more free than New Hampshire for these reasons. But you don't have to say this idea is going to fail because I think this idea is better, because that's not how the world works. And I really do think that is something we need to internalize, and we really need to think about. It's not about the best idea, it's about that marketplace of ideas that I talked about earlier. So we have a new movie coming out. It's going to come out on the 17th, if all goes well. It's called The 101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire. We'll be debuting the trailer at Sovereign Living, who will be showing their latest episodes of their things. And of course, you know, if you want more information, go to freestateproject.org, nhlibertyforum.com, porkfest.com. I'm going to conclude now by just really talking about what we're trying to do. And I think not only trying to do, but what we're actually doing. The Free State Project's slogan is "Liberty in Our Lifetime." Our mascot is the porcupine. The porcupine was chosen because it's a peaceful creature, but it is also a creature that will defend itself from aggression. And if you haven't watched the Facebook meme where it's it's an African porcupine like me. So one porcupine against 17 hungry lion cubs. Treat yourself and go look at that, because the porcupine doesn't have to do much other than show its quills and the lions back down. That is a metaphor, and that is part of how I see what we're doing. But the point about liberty in our lifetime is both the community we're building, and the community is important because I think at these kinds of conferences, sometimes, you know, we get a little dilly because you're so excited that you've actually found some people who kind of think the way you do. What we have discovered in New Hampshire is, like, we don't all think the same, and we're very nuanced, and we're individuals, but it doesn't have to be that sort of insta-friend thing. It is. Like, you will move and you will have a huge community of people where it's like, just add water. It really is insta-friends. But within that world, because we're thousands of people who live this every day, like this is our daily life, you can find, you know, the beekeeping solar panel to a secessionist person and be like, you're gonna be my best friend. You can find those nuances. So it really does create an opportunity to have this large community, but then also to be like, it's not the only thing, it's not the only glue holding things together. It's actually real and personal and fun. So for us, there is no more waiting. There is no more dreaming. There's no more complaining. There's more whining about the state and what can we possibly do. There's no more waiting for permission. If you're a Free State Project participant, if you're someone who is passionate about liberty, you should join with us. We're doing it. We're standing up. We're pushing back, and we're actually winning. Thank you.